Okay, hey, thanks everybody for joining us for another Pop Knowledge. Today we have Andy Shirtliff with the Department of Labor with us today. Andy?
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody, for having me. I'm Andy Shirtliff with the Montana Department of Labor. I'm the new business engagement specialist. But today, the story you're going to be hearing is about my journey with the United States Small Business Administration in the Montana District Office, which is actually based here in Helena. We're going to do a little bit of a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen if that's possible. Host disabled. So
sorry, I got it. My bad.
Okay, thank you. No problem.
There you go.
Cool, thanks. Of course, we got to do the from the beginning. How's the screen look? Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. So again, my name's Andy Shirtliff. Thanks for having me today. Today, we're going to tell a story about true Montana grit. But first, of course, every story has a beginning. And before COVID, my story is, kind of an unlikely one. I was born in Butte, Montana to a single mother from Anaconda. She had a daughter before me, and it's tough being a single parent in the late 70s or even today. So she put me up for adoption when I was raised by my two parents. We spent about a year in Polson before landing in Kalispell, where my dad ran a grocery store and my mom was a salesperson selling office supplies around Northwest Montana. I spent a short time in California after high school. I went to Flathead High, graduated, spent a short time in California, moved back before going to school at Flathead Valley Community College and wrapping up at the University of Montana, and where I graduated at the young age of 30. I was a non-traditional student and the first in my family to graduate college. After that point, I've lived and worked all over Montana. I lived in Billings twice, and this is my second time in Helena, where I've been since 2010. Since 2010, I was appointed by not one, but two governors. I worked for Governor Schweitzer, and I was appointed by Governor Bullock as the small business advocate for the state of Montana. During that time, during that 5 years, Montana was ranked the #1 state in the nation to start a business 4 years in a row. After around 2018, I left working for the state of Montana, and I joined one of the largest accounting firms in the state, based here in Helena. They have 7 offices across the state, worked in their technology division. And of course, just like everybody, COVID hit. And during COVID, a lot of people stayed in. A lot of people, had to change how they did things. Well, I got married. My wife, Laura, who's a Helena native, her mom and dad live here, Bob and Mickey Bennett. We got a new puppy, the little yellow lab down there in the corner. That's Finley. And we stayed busy by volunteering for the American Red Cross Disaster Action Team for Lewis and Clark County, Helena Food Share, Meals on Wheels with Rocky Mountain Development Center, did some work with Exploration Works, helped build a house with Habitat for Humanity, helped with the abandoned horses out at the fairgrounds that the sheriff's office now has custody of, did some snow shoveling for healthcare workers, and now I'm on the Helena Farmers Market Board. And also, too, I joined the U.S. Small Business Administration in their Montana district office, and where I helped out with the federal government's COVID response, helping out small businesses here in Montana. Here's some numbers. These numbers need to be updated. Of course, the Paycheck Protection Act, which is funding that came to the state to help businesses keep employees, retain those employees. The federal government pitched in nearly $2 billion into the state of Montana to help businesses keep people on the payroll. Also, too, there was also 10,000 economic injury disaster loans that we submitted as well, and that's the tune of $540 million. All around, we ended up counting everything. It ended up being about $2.5 billion of money or funds were injected into the state to help keep our economy going during the pandemic. And part of my job was to help talk to businesses and hear how they were leveraging that funding, whether it was to keep employees on board or to do some repairs or do some maintenance or what have you, and pay some bills. And part of that job, we started doing outreach. One day we were sitting in December, just like everybody else, we had cabin fever, trying to figure out what we were going to do next for the next year. And we started kind of talking about how we would work with counties directly to talk about what we did or what we do as an agency, more than just the Paycheck Protection Act and the EIDL funding. What else do we do? We had all sorts of programs that we could offer. And all of a sudden we just said, well, shoot, why don't we just hit the road? And instead of working with the counties, let's drive to every county and meet with at least one business. And we did that in 7 days. We hit all 56 counties. We did 3,450 miles. We met with at least one business owner. Some counties we met with 2, 3, sometimes 5 business owners from 5 different businesses. When we actually met with 79 businesses and 87 business owners. And some quick stats on that: we met with 35 women-owned businesses, 16 mom and pop shops, 4 mom and daughter shops, 7 veteran, 2 native, new businesses or new owners. We met with 11. And of course, at the end of every meeting, we met with 3 breweries. So there's some of the stories. So that's some of the stats. And here's some of the places that we met. From the bottom left there, the Montana, welcome Montana sign, that's from Azalea. And of course, you've got the middle of nowhere sign, then Red Lodge Pizza. Some of the new businesses we met with. We met with Capsule Wardrobe in Glendive that started their business because there were no jobs available in Glendive. We met with the BW Bar and Grill in Hysham. It's the only restaurant in the entire county. And if they went out of business, there's no other places to go eat other than home. Central Avenue Meats in Miles City. It's the gentleman in the middle there. Met with him. He gets his meat processed or he gets his cattle from a ranch in Miles City. Also, too, they're working with Tizer Meats here in just outside of East Helena. And then we met with an Airbnb that, there's not many places to stay in Fort Benton other than the Grand Union Hotel. Somebody started an Airbnb and seemed to be doing just fine. Mom and pop shops, like, for instance, met with Cream of the West over there in Harlow, the Busy Bee Cafe, who they didn't have any employees other than the owner and a cook. The owner was the host, this waiter, and the busser. And they had to find their way out, but also off to the right, you'll see the Mele Kalikimaka. That was at the old hotel over in Twin Bridges. They had a restaurant that had to kind of figure their way out how to serve customers food and keep their doors open. So they put a table in front of the entrance and you had to go check in and get your food made and take it to go. But they serve Hawaiian food. And it's incredibly unique. I haven't heard of any other restaurant in the state that serves Hawaiian food like these folks. You may have heard me say mom and daughter. This is something where, which I think lends itself to business succession. We have an aging workforce, and that workforce is retiring, and we have to train new workforce. Well, the same thing is happening to business owners. Business owners are aging out of the economy and having to find ways to either sell their business or just shutter their business. But we prefer that they hand their business over where they train people. For instance, Trover is a kitchen supply and seasoning store in Whitefish. The owners are the mother is a former executive from Benefice Hospital in Great Falls, and her daughter just wrapped up school at the University of Montana, and they both own Trover. And the plan is in a few years that the daughter will take over full time. And we've got Shipwrecked over in Glasgow. Again, it's the daughter and the mother. They call the mother the mothership. And it plans to retire after a few years and hand it over to her daughter, and then hope to keep it in the family. And then Robinson Creative, which I'm going to talk about later, which is on the right with the little kid pointing at the map. Women-owned businesses. This is something where we found that women's businesses are really incredibly resilient. We met with a Butte Copper Company. Gosh, again, these meetings were in December. These took place a week before Christmas. Silverbow Copper Company was packed with people wearing masks. It was packed with people, and they were hustling and bustling with deliveries. And they found a way to kind of capitalize on what was happening, but also they found ways to adapt. So again, not everybody had a success story. Some people did, some people didn't do so well. Some businesses really struggled. For instance, Meadowlark Brewing over in Sydney, they struggled. So did McKinsey River Pizza in Butte, and so did Cutbank Brewery. I know those are breweries, but breweries and restaurants really took a hit until they were able to start delivering food. But also then they were hit another time with delivery companies. But some did better than others. We've got the quilting store in Deer Lodge. Actually, the mask that I was wearing had University of Montana on it. That fabric was bought in that store, and I had no idea. I got it from a friend of mine. And then we went into, of course, the Sweet Palace. I've got a sweet tooth, so we went to a candy store, and they were hustling and bustling, but they leveraged the internet, which we're going to talk about again a little bit further. And then the construction company out in Stanford, Montana. Again, we've got some other places that did really, really well, like a butcher shop, which was busy. Pioneer Meats and local meat producers did very, very well. They found a way how to get through it thanks to the previous administration was kind of made it more lenient when it came to meat producers not having to go through certain regulations where they could actually sell it in their own backyard or their own communities instead of shipping it off somewhere else, because frankly, a lot of the meat that you see in our stores is from another country. It's from Brazil or Argentina. Now we're starting to see a little bit more local meat. It's nice to know where your meat and your produce comes from. So then, what are some of the things that help these businesses survive? Well, it's communities. Community support. Communities rallied around these Main Street Montana businesses. For instance, there was the sign where the picture on the left is from town. It's actually called Twin Sister Trading Company. The gal who runs that place started crying, being so thankful we asked her, so how'd you make it through the pandemic? And she started crying, and she said, I couldn't do it without my community of White Sulphur Springs. We met with a veteran business owner in Townsend. It's a gym called V42, women owned, veteran owned. And we asked her, as I'm taking notes, I'm writing down notes. I look up and she's bawling, and she says, I had a plan to email all my guests, all these people at my gym, my subscribers, and I was going to give them their money back. And I hit send, and within 5 minutes, I had phone calls, texts, and emails saying, no, you won't. She said, I actually had a gentleman call me up, said, the hell you will. You'll keep my money, and you'll keep taking my money monthly until you guys open your door. And so a lot of every business that we spoke with said it was the local community that kept them open. For instance, we had businesses that would tell us, from Jordan, Montana, where the largest fire in the US took place back in 2017, they had a local coffee shop. The picture on the bottom right, we had a local coffee shop there that said, if we want to go to do our quarterly shopping in the big city, we're driving to Miles City. And then we do a once a year or twice a year trip down to Billings. And that's what they consider like their big outing. A lot of people, instead of going to Miles City, stuck close to home, and they shopped at their local places. They shopped at local places. Also, too, something else that we learned: the more rural, the more consolidated. For instance, in Polson, Montana, there's a place that sells handcrafted goods from over 80 Montana artists. There's a store in Miles City that is called Rustic and Vintage, which is the picture front and center, that has, I believe, 100 different artists and other folks working. And then off to the right is a business in Circle, Montana that worked with local makers, local craftsmen, local jewelry makers to help sell their wares in a location so that they could stay in business. Oops. And again, of course, you've got a spa up in Shelby, Montana, Polson, and then Thompson Falls. One thing that really helped businesses was their internet connection. It saved their businesses, not only saved it, but it expanded their markets. We met with X-Bar Studios over in St. Regis, that is a high-end jewelry maker. We met with her at a gas station because she has an e-commerce business. We met with Beautiful Life Clothing Company in Anaconda that they had to close their doors, but they found ways around the rules where you could call up and say, I would like to, reserve some time to go tour your business and pick out the clothes I want. Or they would do personal shopping where they would hold up a cell phone and they would videotape they would live broadcast around the room and say, here's our deals. Or if you want to do a special buying, they would shop you around the store using their cell phone. They actually had customers all the way over in New York City, thanks to having internet access. And there's also there's a manufacturer out of Conrad, Montana called Golden Fox Metals that makes a certain type of piece of equipment that is used to sift through slag piles or dirt and help sift out certain precious metals. They had a premonition that something was coming. The gentleman's wife is a EMT. There you have a child that was on a sports team, and they run this business together. And the wife noticed that people were starting to get sick. The entire wrestling team got sick. They said, okay, something's happening. In the middle of the night, the husband woke up and said, well, I need to double up on my order of inventory. I just have this feeling. Sure enough, he did buy this stuff. He then found out he was the only game in town when it came to this particular type of equipment. He started getting calls from Australia and Dubai for his equipment. So, he kept his mind on his money and his money on his mind when it came to his business. And he knew that he needed to act, and he acted on that instinct. But also too, some people had to make some business decisions, healthcare and safety versus keeping their doors open. And they had to find that resolve to make those tough decisions, to kind of thread that needle. For instance, we met with a coffee company in Ekalaka, Montana, where it was a mother-daughter owned business. And I took that photo at sunrise, and found out that the mother died a month before we met with the owner, and she died from COVID complications. They had the staff was all masked up, and it's a very small town. Most of their guests were masked up. It was kind of come and grab and go, but they had to make that decision. However, we asked them about Paycheck Protection Program, about the mask mandate and how did that affect them. They said, well, being that far southeast, COVID didn't affect us. We saw it hit western half of Montana, and then it moved its way slowly across the state. They said it didn't affect us until a month later, until we got our first case. Also, but by the time that they tried to tap into some funds, some of that funding was dried up already. And so it's kind of tough being out there in rural Montana. So there are some opportunities, some things that we learned from this trip, for instance, focusing on our people, our places, and our prosperity. I can get into this more, but the focus has to be, how do we train and retrain our workforce? How do we keep the workers that we have, attract more workers, and hopefully keep our businesses open? And I can go into that more too, but that we as a community, housing we are not immune to our housing issues. It's happening statewide. Lack of workforce is happening statewide. We just don't have enough people in the pipeline to help meet the needs of the baby boomers who are now retiring. Some are taking their leave earlier than some, and it's all hitting at once. In COVID, if we didn't get hit enough, now we're being hit by workforce shortages, housing shortages, childcare shortages. Now we're looking at transportation shortages. There was a meeting last night for the Big Sky Rail Authority trying to get rail to have a stop here if we have passenger rail again. And Lewis and Clark County is one of the last holdouts. I'm a big supporter of bringing, the rail through here again, passenger rail, so that we can traverse, our state safely, and also to bring more customers and hopefully more money into our community. Also, too, I think we notice is that internet broadband access is important. And I think we need to look at how do we leverage our libraries to help with that effort. And of course, our industries, we need to strengthen, we need to add more value to our businesses, help our businesses grow, expand, and hopefully have some here relocate. But in the meantime, not just having workers, we need more entrepreneurs. We need mentorship and guidance from people who are older to help guide the new generation of business owners and hopefully remove some barriers and hopefully maybe some investment. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any. That's my contact info. That's my cell phone and my email. Feel free to get a hold of me. I'm happy to chat and or email or text. And with that, thank you very much. So I see we got somebody new. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Andy. That's Samara.
Hi, Samara.
So does anybody have any questions for Andy?
I bet Dave does.
Come on, Dave, don't let me down.
You went to every county in the state.
Seems like I sort of got the impression that you were cherry picking all of your places that you went to on your 56 county on it. I used to travel around a fair amount, but everything has changed since I've last done any of that on there. But most of that stuff wasn't around. Seemed to be relatively new.
You were exactly right, Dave. So we worked with the small business development centers, the SBDC shops. It is a federally funded program through the SBA, but it's run by the state of Montana. They are housed at the Department of Commerce, but they have 10 locations across the state. We worked with them to help. We asked them, are there businesses that we should meet with during, on this trip? And most of who they work with are kind of new businesses or businesses that have been around for a while. But for instance, Cream of the West has been around for over 100 years over in Harlow or Harleton, Montana. But there were some, like the clothing store in Glendive had just been open in May. And so having those businesses that open in the middle of the pandemic, I think really got me thinking about, well, not just surviving, but starting a business and I'm getting some feedback, but starting a business and surviving, I think shows our, our true grit and resolve as a state. And like Dave, you're right. A lot of them, before the trip, I'd been to like 50 or 52 counties. Now I've been to all 56. And there were some businesses that we met with, one of which was a hotel that we stayed up in Scobie. And they said, we have 2 floors and we haven't had anybody stay on the second floor in probably like weeks. You could tell when you get into one of the rooms and, the film on the water, it was, you could tell.
I used to have a hard time trying to get into that hotel there because it was always full.
Yep.
Stayed there all the time, and during hunting season it was really terrible.
And that's something I didn't talk about. I had in my notes here was, the border closing really hit the northern tier of our state. Went to Eureka and then Scobie, that guy's like, we used to be jam-packed during hunting season, but then you talk to a guy in Baker, he's like, oh yeah, we are full all the time. Doesn't matter, because people were coming over from the Dakotas and from Wyoming. But the border towns really, really struggled. But
they used to, there was Scobie and stuff on there that they used to give keys out. so that you could cross any time during the 24 hours on there when they shut down half the day at least on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also
Funny.
gates within a mile of either side of that all you got to do is open the gate and come through. And it's trading on there. People don't talk too much about it, but there's ways around a lot of that stuff. During the oil embargo back in the 70s and stuff on there, you used to see the tanker trucks going across a lot of those places on it. So there's a lot of different things that go on. And I suspect that some of the newer people on it don't know of some of those things that have gone on in the past and stuff on there.
Sure.
I've been
Sure.
at that creamery on there you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
on it, but didn't recognize the name and stuff. I'm not too good with the names. You can ask any of these people. I just go there.
You bet. Thanks, Dave. Any other questions or thoughts or comments?
Tamara, did you say something a little bit earlier? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just amazed you went to 56 counties in 7 days.
Yeah.
That, did you have a favorite place?
Gosh, being from the Flathead, it's always good to be home. The guy I drove with, we kind of shared responsibility. I ended up driving a whole lot of that trip. We stopped at a deli / it's called Benelli's Bistro, it's on First Avenue East in Kalispell. My oldest childhood friend owns it with him and his wife, and his kids work there. And my boss could not stop talking about the sandwich that they made. We would go everywhere and he'd kind of lean over like 5 days later. He's like, this isn't as good as Benelli's. It was great to see areas of the state I've always wanted to go to, like Plentywood. My dad was born in Plentywood. I never had the chance to go there. Too bad I got to see it at night. I was really hoping to see it during the day and spend a little bit more time, but to hit 56 counties in 1 week, we had to make our visits really short. When it comes to favorites, it was nice to go to Red Lodge and try their pizza at their brewery, or stop in to see my buddy down in Butte who owns McKinsey River Pizza. There were a lot of times, like Dave was saying, there were some businesses I wish we had a chance to meet with. There were some places, we started to plan kind of the next trip. We skipped 2021. We were looking at 2022 before I jumped ship to go join the Montana Department of Labor to help with our workforce crisis. In terms of favorites, of course, the Sweet Palace was awesome. But the history behind some of these businesses and hearing the reason why they started their business, that stemmed from when I first started with the SBA. Short story long, or long story short, my job was to do outreach with businesses and say, hey, how's the funding working? How is it helping? We had like a set number of questions, and I said, this is kind of it just felt repetitive. I want to know why they started the business. And man, I had conversations that were scheduled for like 10 minutes that lasted an hour and a half. Like how, why the business started, what it means to the community, and vice versa, what the community means to them. And gosh, when I got back, I started thinking about writing a book about it. So kind of started putting together some initial thoughts, like the notes you have here. And this was, just kind of the Cliff's Notes light version of it. There was a lot of meetings that we had with businesses and a lot of struggles, and a lot of people had to make some tough decisions, but also to some very creative decisions that paid off. And, we just like recently, we're one of the top states to start a business. Montana is an entrepreneurial state. We have that entrepreneurial spirit. I think it's not just entrepreneurial. It's like, we're not risk averse. And also too, we kind of like doing things on our own. And if someone has an idea, it's like, I can do that, but I could probably do it for cheaper, or I could do it better. So yeah, it was great to see Montana, during one of our toughest times in our, in recent history, probably the worst being, in recent memory is probably, 2000, September 11th. Our nation went through a lot, and, to find people out in some of the deepest, farthest, ruralist areas of Montana still making it work and being successful at it. I think there's a million and one stories out there. And we put out like a press release after the visit. It kind of touched on a few of them, but I really wanted to share some of the stories, the personal stories, and hearing from people saying, yeah, I've got customers in Dubai now, thanks to this thing, or I've got, or people, losing their mother or losing their siblings. And so, going through those things we went through, the state went through a lot, and I wanted to hear how they did it. And I think we got, and I think, so I don't know, maybe that book might be something. So.
Is there any plans to follow up how well they're doing in, say, 3 to 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah, I don't. One of the things I did too is right afterwards, I sent everybody a thank you note, handwritten thank you note with my business card. I heard back from some of them. You kind of, if you're driving through the area, you kind of peek in to see how they're doing. Part of the plan is to follow up for 2021. If we were going to do it last year, that was part of the plan, is to go meet with a new business, but also to follow up with the business that we met with in that county. We didn't have a chance to do that, unfortunately. And then they started to talk about it for 2022. And if they do it, they're not going to wait until December. They're probably going to do it. We had considered doing it through the summer of this year, but I'm no longer with that agency. But I'll keep an eye out that one of the suggestions I made is to send out a press release so people knew we were coming. We just didn't know, because we didn't want a crowd to show up in 2020 with the rules and regulations how they were. But we did have some people waiting outside up in Whitefish, that mom and daughter business that I talked about, Trover. We had a lady hovering outside who had heard that we were on our way, and she cornered me when I was crossing the street and said, I'm a business owner up on Whitefish Mountain Resort, or Big Mountain as we grew up knowing it. Had said, I have a bar and restaurant up on the mountain that's really struggling. What do I need to do? We ended up my coworker and I ended up talking about it on the way up to the trip to Eureka. And on the way back, we called her, the business owner back in Whitefish. And we said, hey, here's how we can help. Here's 3 things. I'm going to put you in touch with so-and-so. They're going to call you tomorrow morning. And they ended up figuring out that they were eligible for some financial help. So that's stuff where if we needed to have something immediately followed up, we were doing it on the car to our next trip, to our next stop. But hitting, 11 counties or 14 counties in one day, to answer your question, yeah, it's a lot of windshield time, and it feels really good to stretch when you get out of the car. So, and it's not bad when you have some beautiful scenery to look at.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, windshield time.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So it's funny. We actually ran into a guy outside at Eddie's Corner, right outside of Lewistown, and we ran into him 3 days later at a restaurant in Scobie across the street from that hotel. And we look at each other. I was like, Steve, Andy, how you doing, man? It's good to see you. So we ended up having a beverage together and a burger. So yeah, it's a good trip. It's a big sky, but a small world out there. So
Yeah, exactly, and stuff on it.
mm-hmm.
Awesome. Great. Well,
Cool.
If nobody else has any more questions, we can let Andy go.
You bet. Well, thank you very much. I was honored to have the chance to share this a little bit. Happy to thank you, Claire. Thanks for being a part. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Rocky team. They've got my contact info. I'm happy to talk more about this. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, we sure appreciate having you and spending time with you, and we hope we can call on you again sometime.
You bet, and happy to help out too. It was a joy for Laura and I to do the Meals on Wheels. So we enjoyed that a lot, and so yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. All right, thanks so much, Andy. Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.